honored and delighted to have the chance to introduce our next speaker, who I'm proud to say is a very dedicated member of the ICD Advisory Board, Dr. Erhard Busek. Many of you know Dr. Busek as the former Vice-Chancellor of Austria, former Minister for Science and Research of Austria as well. In his background, he's actually an Austrian lawyer, a politician of the Christian Conservative People's Party, and the former Vice President of Austria. Since 1995, he has devoted much of his time to Central European and cultural issues. Meanwhile, he has been a government official for EU enlargement. Dr. Busek is a special coordinator for the Stability and Growth Pact for Southeast Europe, as well as a member of the Board of Trustees of the initiative Giving Europe a Soul. He works as a journalist, focusing on the international role of Austria, particularly with regard to Central Europe, cultural and educational policies, as well as cooperation with neighboring countries located east of Europe. The lecture topic that he's chosen today is the impact of immigration, education, and the funding of youth education on North-South solidarity and divisions between the regions of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a sincere welcome to Dr. Erhard Busek. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear Mark, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for the invitation and also for the challenging theme. I think the title of this speech was a compromise between the Institute and me, and here everything was packed together. I think it would be a miracle if I'm able within 30 minutes to cover immigration, education, funding for youth education, North-South solidarity and divisions between the regions of Europe. So I'm quite happy that the President of the Economic and Social Council of the European Union is with me, because he's covering the next and also a part of these issues here. First of all, I think it is a real theme, not for the future, it's for the present. And it's one of the dangers of the development for the next generations. I think here we are in a new situation which was crystallized maybe by the economic crisis, banking crisis, and so on and so on. But not only, I think it is also a result of enlargement of the European Union, of the fact that we have less borders on the one side, and on the other side that we have tendencies to build up new borders, which I think is not very favorable. Maybe also the solution capacity is really challenged. First of all, it is one of my main theses. I'm a fan of crisis, I may confess, because I'm a dinosaur. I learned the old Greek language, and if you're looking to the source, what out the word crisis is coming, it's coming from the word krino. And if you translate it, it means to judge and to decide. And so far, all these crises we have are a challenge for judgment and decision making. Maybe we are missing sometimes a lot of leadership, especially on the questions in which we are. Second thesis, it's not a thesis, it's a reality. We are living in the global village. So far, if you are living in a village, I think to commute between the different parts of the village is comparatively easy. And by the possibilities of transport and so on, I think it's really happening. And our political systems are not yet fitting to this situation. I think even sometimes, as a former politician, I may say, I have the impression that the politicians did not understand this situation until now fully, which is creating here for sure a lot of problems. So far, I think there are different areas here touched by the questions which are existing, and we are missing the real answers on this. There's a tendency in politics, and it is a question of cultural diplomacy, not only diplomacy, not only culture. I think this combination also in politics is quite necessary, because the answers of different political parties is in the direction of separation. Let's build up new borders. There's a real demand here. I give you one primitive example. I don't want to blame the beloved ministers of interior of the European Union, but the last decision, I think, not to open Schengen for Romania and Bulgaria was a very impressive thing, because how did they justify it? they said, oh, then corruption from Bulgaria and Romania will move to the other parts of the European Union if there are no visa. I think, may I say, there's also corruption in the other member states of the European Union. Even my country, I may tell you, there are really nice stories. And the second one is, I think if somebody is a criminal, he is always able to overcome the visa request by corruption, easily. I think we have a lot of cases at the courts of the different member states of the European Union, not really a problem. I think it's one of the most primitive, or I may say sometimes silly, decision-making ways which are done really. I think it is, and that's connected with our theme, as a problem also coming out of the differences in economy and in the social level. Because so far there's a tendency of the human being to move to better places. So far the real challenge is the fact that we have huge differences between the different regions of Europe, and for sure differences between Europe and other parts of the world. And we are able, I think, to commute. I think you can see the outstanding difficult questions, the Africans arriving at the Italian islands and so on and so on. Also, I think political problems are creating a lot of things. We are until now not aware what we will do with the Syrian refugees. It is a very high number here. The last figure I read was 1 million Syrians are already outside. Nobody knows, are they going back? I think one of my responsibility was to look to the refugees from Kosovo, as the Milosevic regime did a lot of harm to the Kosovo Albanians. They went outside. I'm always admiring them that they all went back, which I think was an extremely good decision. But otherwise, if those are staying outside, is for sure creating a problem. It is coming out of the differences between the economic and social situation, and so far I may touch divisions between the regions of Europe. I am a dinosaur, I may say, and I grew up in the time of the East-West division of Europe, by the Iron Curtain and so on and so on. Now, if you read analysis and newspapers, we have a North-South division. I think there are not really clear dividing lines, because, for example, to this North-South division within the European Union and between Europe, for example, my home country, Austria, is also put to this. For the feeling of the Austrians, we are not living in the north of Europe. That's quite different. It's up to the Swedish lady, I think, to say we are Northern Europe. Here you can see how difficult it is. It's a division line, but the parts who are doing better economically and those who are having a lot of difficulties. Division lines are a real problem. It was told by Mark that I was engaged in Southeast Europe. I'm still this. Also, I think we are not realizing what the situations are. I remember the Nobel Prize winner on economy, Paul Krugman. In 2008, he said, okay, now by this economic crisis, Central, Eastern and Southeast Europe will totally break down and will be bankrupt. He did a nice additional remark, also the Austrian banks engaged in this region will break down. It was not foreseen that Southern Europe is now the real problem. I think we were not aware that Portugal, Spain, Southern Italy and Greece might be the areas of problems here for sure existing. It is a tremendous changing situation which we have, and the political institutions are partly not really capable to do this and to deal with them. Also, maybe may say the discussions are not very much focusing here existing on the real problems. That's a little bit for the analysis. I think it's not very exact, but to give you a certain input. Immigration is a reality. And don't think that the immigration, that's a remark to the Europeans, is invented in the 21st century. I think I'm coming out of a city, Vienna, which was created by immigration. For example, Vienna at the end of the 19th century was the second biggest Czech city. Being in German-speaking environment, for sure, it was immigration because work was here. It was richer to come from the Bohemia, as it was named, from the Czech-speaking parts, to go to Austria. And that's again happening. I give you a primitive example on this city of Vienna. I think it was outlet in the beginning of the 20th century with 2 million inhabitants. I was deputy mayor for 13 years in Vienna, and in this time the population was going down. I think we had the perspective to be around 2020 only less than 1 million inhabitants, starting from 2 to 1 million. Now, by the changes, downfall of the Iron Curtain, we are coming closer again to 2 million inhabitants. Why? The birth rate is extremely low. I think the immigrants are doing here the job. Even the birth rates of the immigrants are higher, which is also creating a lot of problems. Our system is not really fitting to the consequences of this immigration because, and here I'm covering now education. I think we have to build up new schools. For a longer time before, we have closed schools. Now we have to build new schools. The building is not the problem. The problem are the teachers. Because for this situation, for the youngsters coming out of this family, I think you have in one class having 2 teachers, one who is able to deal with the difficulties of the language skills, and to do some training and so on and so on. The teachers are not trained on this subject. That's one of the big problems here existing. I'm not speaking about other social problems. I'm responsible for the Medical University in Vienna. I think we have a huge problem by those who are coming as a patient here, because I think we need even persons for translation to declare what are they missing, where are the problems with the health, that it is understood by the doctors. Happy enough, I think we have now a lot of young doctors coming out also of these countries who are able to help here. That's also one of the developments which was not really foreseen by the health authorities. I think one I want to say also concerning education. The younger generation may be born already in our parts, but I think being able to easier integrate, they are in education sometimes more successful as the indigenous people, because they have the feeling of competition and they are running to be more effective and to be more successful, because they have a feeling of the gap between where they are socially, economically, and that they have to do even more. That's a very interesting development, for sure, also existing, and I have a deep respect here for this. Hopefully, if politics is not too much focusing on the differences, I think concerning the integration in between the young generation, it's running quite well. The danger is coming from outside, that the kind of populism or even the medias and so on are focusing on this. I think this immigration is a big problem. Consider the suburbs of the French cities, for example. That's an outstanding problem of integration. And it is not so easy how it is sometimes done. It's a problem of cultural differences. I think they are all Islamic, therefore they are Talibans or whatever, which is really horrible. I think it is a job for economy, for preparing jobs, for social workers, and so on and so on. And here is not enough done. And it is for sure a job of cultural diplomacy, is I think a word on a too high level, of a certain kind of cultural integration to deal with differences, and I think to bring them really together. We have also a very interesting problem. It's partly at home here in Germany. I am a member of a commission between Turks and Germans here in Germany. I don't know why, but they invited me. The interesting discussions we have here is between the German Turks and the Turkish Turks. I think because I think the Turkish Turks are explaining to the German Turks how to be a Turk, and the German Turks are explaining to the Turkish Turks that the situation is for sure different. And I think the composition of this committee is outstanding. Cem Özdemir, for example, the chair of the Greens here, one of the chairs of the Greens, is also part of this commission. We have a lot of artists and so on and so on. And that's also creating political problems, because Prime Minister Erdogan was asking for Turkish schools here in Germany, and a former Minister of Interior was sitting also on this session, Otto Schily, and he was criticizing the German Turks with a German passport, that they have to feel German and not Turkish. You are German, Otto Schily said very straight, and not a Turk. And if you are a Turk, go home. Here you can see the whole difficulty which is here existing, and I think we have not yet developed all the necessary instruments which are for sure quite necessary. Don't forget religion. I think here are also huge differences. Christianity in Europe, I think, is more secularized in a certain way. And on the other side, we have a development within the Islam. It's a kind of a revival about the content, the behavior, and so on and so on, for sure. And that's also creating differences. In general, I don't want to say, it's not justified to say they are all Talibans and they want to build up the Sharia and jihad is coming and all this, what is said, it's really silly. But for sure, we have also to look to some movements within the Arab countries which are trying to radicalize the situation. Wahhabis, for example. The beloved royal family of Saudi Arabia is putting a lot of monies to the Wahhabis to bring them outside. For example, all the religious teachers for the Islamic religion in Austria are educated in Bosnia and in Sanjak. It is done mainly by Wahhabis. They are getting a lot of money and then they are moved to Austria having not the slightest clue where they are going. That's also creating a huge problem. I don't want to blame it. I think the approach to the Islam in Europe is by majority not the right one because we have a lack of knowledge, really. Because it's sometimes very primitive. All Islamists are radical and so on and so on. Nearly nobody knows the different streams within the Islamic religion, that they have even more difficulties and tensions between these different parts, Shia and Sunni, and you can see it in Syria and by the Arab Spring, also in the other parts. The battle here is quite a strong one. And for sure, here has to be more done. That's a job of cultural diplomacy, for sure. It should not be underestimated here, because a lot of things can be happen which is quite different. I want to stop in this and want to focus on the last part, division between the regions of Europe. I've already mentioned this north-south difference, which is sometimes going in the direction that we have to divide the European Union. Development of integration in 2 speeds, for example, which is a complete nonsense seen from my side, because I think one of the advantages of the integration process is that we are coming closer and closer to one Europe. And against all the criticism, I may say it is until now a real success story. If you're a little bit older, you can see the differences. What is necessary? We have high unemployment rates. It's also not new. Being involved in Southeast Europe or in the Balkans, we have an unemployment rate of 45%. In Kosovo, I think we have in Croatia, Serbia, 25, 30, 35%. It's necessary to consider what to do with this. It's depending on investment here to create jobs, and it is depending on education. I like the European Union, but I'm criticizing the European on one subject, that there is no responsibility of the European Union on education. That's a mistake of the nation state, that it is up to the nation state, because here the integration and cooperation is not really working. I think there are some instruments outstanding for example, Erasmus, Socrates, Leonardo, and all these programs, but even there are silly ideas to cancel it. I think the European Parliament did a very good job, I think, to stop this movement on this. But I think we have to do even more on this education. I'll give you a primitive example. I'm a Jean Monnet professor. This is a very nice institution by the European Union, and we had a meeting. And here in the analysis it came up, for example, that there's a big request in Portugal and Spain on learning the German language. Why? Because the youngsters want to go to Germany, maybe to find some jobs here, and I think to have an opportunity to earn money to survive here. The Goethe institutes, they are preparing language courses, are overcrowded, no chance. So far, we discussed within the Jean Monnet professors, I think you have to build up courses on the German language in your universities. I think here the system of education and science has to be more mobile on demands. And I think it has to be demand-driven here, which is sometimes difficult by all my deep respect to the university system. I think here a lot can be done. I'm happy to say that by the budget decisions for the future from 2014 on, they provided a lot of money for fighting the unemployment for the younger generation. But may I say, hopefully they are developing also plans on this, because until now there are not too much ideas how it is done. I think it's very nice that there's some money, but we have to do something with the money. That's one of the problems, for example. Being involved in Southeast Europe, there's a lot of money around, but what we are really missing is persons who are able to develop the projects, how it is done in reality. There's a certain gap between the demands. Everybody, each government has a very good idea what to do, but how we are arriving that it can be realized, the implementation is one of the big problems. It's an education problem. I think that's the only chance, and hopefully I think we are able to develop more ideas going here in this direction and to move on. Because we have also one problem, because investment might go out to countries with cheaper labor force. For the moment it's India and China and so on, but maybe we have also parts in Europe or in the neighboring parts where it's quite necessary here to do. I think this is a short overview about this current situation. Personally, I think to make a summary, the whole problem which is mentioned here, and rightly mentioned here, is always connected with education. First of all, education, that we are knowing how the others are. I think that's one of the key questions, to teach better mutual understanding by information, not how we are, how the others are, and what are the connection points and what are the dividing lines. But also dividing lines are sometimes here necessary, but they have to be understood. I think that is a big job of on a higher level of cultural diplomacy which has to happen, that we are getting a feeling about the other. That's one of the immense dangers existing, that politics or some political groups are focusing on the others. Let's keep out the others here. Austria is a tiny country. I think not everything is decided and done there, but I may say we had for a longer time a development. They are not even able to speak our language, was one of the arguments against those who are coming in. May I say, what is the biggest group in Austria now? It is young labor force coming from where? From Eastern Germany. For sure, the Eastern Germans are speaking German. You cannot tell them, you are not speaking our language. Maybe in a certain sense they are not speaking the language by the mood and so on and so on. Here the argument is finished. So far, sometimes a very primitive argument is coming up, they are so German. You know, why should they not be German? They are German, huh? Because I think I don't want that somebody is saying to me, you are so Austrian. It makes no sense. Huh? Here you can see what it is really done. And the question of culture, as a question of mutual understanding, is of a great importance. I think here we need a common strategy to develop. It's not only belonging on agreements, memorandum of understanding, and it's not even belonging on conferences. And so I think this is one of the main subjects that's not too much developed. If you are looking to our education systems, not only in schools, it might be better at universities by the exchange. I think we need it for the common citizens also. Here, I'm convinced that, for example, public broadcasting has a great importance by TV and so on and so on. And it is an open question how Internet, as a modern instrument of social media, can fit to this situation as a learning instrument here. Until now, I think it's not a learning instrument. Sometimes I have my doubts on the question, are the social medias social? I'm not quite sure. Sometimes it's very aggressive what is written here internally and so on and so on. And I think here to develop programs on this, not on a national level, but maybe by NGOs or so, it's easier to do it by them, has a great importance. So far, Mark, I will tell you, a great job for the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Busek. Before you leave the podium, we would have time for one or two questions from the audience. So I want to try to allow for as much interaction as we can. I see a few hands already here. Ladies first. And as always, if you could please stand and introduce yourself. Try to keep the questions brief and the responses brief, and we can try to get as many voices as possible. Please.
Salam from Lebanon. I wanted to ask about the last procedure that the European Union take in front of the illegal immigration. Illegal immigration. What's the last?
What question?
What's the last procedure done by the European Union?
On what?
To fight the illegal immigration.
That's up to the nation state. I think there's no common strategy by the European Union. There is on one part, I think, frontier. It is the supervision on borders. But this is very much specified. For example, there's a tough exercise on the Turkish, Greek, Bulgarian border here. There's a lot done. But this is more border control on the level of police, even partly a little bit military, but in reality nothing else. I think the control of passports, also with these chips and so on, for sure is very much developed. But I think that's not the only solution. I think you can go further on. The discussion about quotas and allowance to work and so on must be also a part. But this is very much on the national level. Here we have a very strange development in general in the European Union. So the solution of all these questions have to be more and more supranational. If you are looking to the banking crisis and, we need European regulations, and they are done. But on the other side, the different governments are looking to, the solution must be on the national level. That's coming out of the fact that you have nearly every half a year important elections everywhere. And so far by these elections, they are focusing to do it by the nation. If you are looking, for example, to the last elections in different countries, that's very much focused on this. I'm personally convinced that Monti did a great job with Italy, but who get the votes? Grillo, Berlusconi, and so on, being against Europe, but Europe is a reality, everyday reality, if you are looking to the streets and so on.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Busek. My name is Olli Suominen. I'm a master's student here at the ICD. Now, during the last 5 years or so, there has been a great rise in very extremist opinions in Europe, right-wing, but also others. And for example, in Finland, where I'm from, we've seen for the first time very right-wing extremist actions and opinions surface up in the media and so.
True Finns.
Yes, true Finns. And now if all these problems you mentioned, the problems created by immigration, youth unemployment, lack of cultural understanding, and the economic problems and divisions between the European Union regions, if they're not settled properly, then how realistic do you see the rise of, what do you see the problem, how to explain? Do you see that the extremist opinions are a real threat to European Union and the European countries in the future if these problems are not solved? Thank you.
I think to be quite straight, this anti-EU or anti-integration or anti-foreigners or whatever anti you are saying is coming out of a certain egoism. I think there's a beautiful saying in my home city, I try to translate it. Everybody thinking on himself. Only me, thinking on myself. Here you can see, if you consider this is a very important sentence. And this is happening by this. Because on the other side, we are very much depending on each other. I know it, as far as I know Finland, I think your investment outside, not only by Nokia or what else, I think had a great impact on the situation for Finland, a very positive one. And so far, I think we need also labor force coming from outside, not only by our birth rate. My home country, Austria, I think by the downfall of the Iron Curtain, the enterprises did a huge investment in Eastern and Southeastern Europe, and that we are the third richest country within the European Union was created by this. But everybody is against. They are taking the money which we are earning outside for the Austrians and saying, but that should not be. What else should be? I think there is no alternative on this subject. Even I told you I'm responsible for the medical university in Vienna. If I'm going there to the hospital, not only the nurses and those who are assisting, all the doctors are by 60% coming from our neighboring countries. We are very much depending on this. And an overage society in which we are is not able to solve the problems. I think it is done in Vienna, for example, by the Slovaks, by the Polish, and so on and so on. I think here we have to teach in a certain way solidarity. The European Union was a concept of solidarity. For example, the famous regional policy and all the funds are funded on the idea of solidarity, that those parts who are less developed are coming up. But this has to be done by information to show this importance, which I think is not enough done. That's not the responsibility of the European Union. This is a responsibility, I think, of the nation states and of the governments of the education system.
Yep. I'd like to thank you for the wonderful report and speech. I'm from Georgia, the founder and director of the private school ICM. Georgian students are very much motivated to study abroad, especially in the United States. We have flex program participants, and the representative of Georgia, ambassador of Georgia in Austria is my student, Bata Kaprindashvili, and I'm very proud of it. And I'm interested if there is any exchange program among Austrian, like this flex program, as Americans have. Is there any program in Austria?
Around '89 we had a lot of exchange programs.
Yeah.
I think, beg your pardon for saying, I was Minister for Science and Research and also Education, and I was very much forcing it. Now we have a cut down. I think we have no money, budget problems, and the debts, and so on and so on. And where you are cutting, where it is not hurting the own population, it's hurting the others coming from outside. And it is very short-sighted here. May I say, and here I'm critical on the general development, we have to say many thanks to Ralph Dahndorf. He was a commissioner who created Erasmus, Socrates, and these exchange programs. But it's a long time ago, and Ralph Dahndorf is already dead. He died as Lord Ralph in Great Britain. These programs have to be further developed. Yeah, I think it has to be done on a broader sense. I'm a chair of a foundation in Austria. We are doing school exchanges on a comparatively very low level for Eastern and Southeastern Europe. The results are outstanding, may I say. But it's extremely difficult, I think, to convince the schools, the teachers to do it. It's creating a lot of problems. Why they are coming, they will stay at home and so on and so on. And I think it is a problem of a public mood. What I'm really missing, and I'm saying it until I'm successful, we have no real European public. I'll give you one example. If you're switching on your TV stations in general, you will find talk shows. Every evening a talk show, sometimes boring. There is no European talk show existing. I was going to the European Broadcasting Union asking why is there no European talk show. He said, yeah, you have to understand, we have to divide the advertisement, and nobody wants to give the money to others. So far we have in reality only one European talk show, I may say, don't laugh too much about. It's the Eurovision Song Contest. Because they are voting at the end about the others, and here you can see in which countries they are in favor of whom and are they against whom. Sometimes this we are dealing with the Swiss, we are saying, nobody loves us because they didn't vote for us, and so on and so on. So far, my proposal for a long time, let's skip the songs, they are not so good. Let's only vote, because we can learn a lot out of this.
Thank you very much.